Oh, well, this is gonna be a rough one. So obviously, if you've seen the title of this video, you know what's coming. You've been prepared for shocking takes, so kindly relax your sphincter before unleashing crap all over the comments section. Let's keep it civil and respectful in the comments, knowing that you clicked on the video of hot takes. No Demon Souls as per usual, but remember to subscribe for more Soulsborne content. First is Dark Souls. So you guys have witnessed this hot take already if you've seen my top 15 areas of Soulsborne video. But I'm going to reinforce it here and take it even a step further. Blighttown is one of the best areas in Dark Souls 1. That's right, I love Blighttown. You heard correctly. To be fair, I never played this game on the original release on Xbox or PlayStation, meaning I never had to sit through 10 FPS. But I love the place. It's visually iconic, thematically relevant, fittingly challenging, and expands the possibilities of the Dark Souls world. But because you guys already knew I loved Blighttown, I'm gonna take it a step further. I don't think many of the individual Dark Souls 1 areas are phenomenal to me. Whoa. Take a step back, let me explain. On their own, the Dark Souls 1 areas are solid, atmospheric, and lovely to explore. But what makes Dark Souls 1 so impactful is the sum of its parts, not the individual values. The way the world flows together like an intricately woven tapestry is what makes it feel like a completed universe outside of our own. Individual areas like Ash Lake only hold the real impact they do because of the wonder of discovery, not because they are so stunning on their own. Dark Souls 2 has a lot of iconic and striking visuals, but because the world feels less intensely formed, it doesn't strike the same emotional chord. Moments like looping back to Firelink Shrine. Okay, let's be honest, you guys have probably watched 100 video essays on the interconnectivity of Dark Souls 1, so let's move on to Dark Souls 2. Dark Souls 2 hot takes? Well, just about any positive take on Dark Souls 2 seems like a hot take on YouTube these days. Let's see, the Emerald Herald is the best Firekeeper. No, not that one. Covetous Demon is a handsome lad. No, not that one. Yes, I got it. Vanilla Dark Souls 2 is the definitive Dark Souls 2 experience. And this one is slightly less researched overall, but what I can say is that after completing the game more than once on Vanilla and more than once on Scholar, I vastly prefer Vanilla. There are some minor quality of life changes in Scholar that are preferable, but to me, almost every severe problem I have with Dark Souls 2 is exacerbated by the supposed definitive improved edition. There are way more unnecessarily spammed enemies, and the game is borderline unenjoyable for me. If you absolutely hated Dark Souls 2, but you only ever played Scholar, maybe try Vanilla. It could be an improved experience. I kind of blindly trusted everyone on this and then learned the hard way that I preferred Vanilla. So Lawrence is one of the best bosses of the series. Honestly, do I have to say more? In some ways, he might be a precursor to Elden Ring and the explosive amounts of damage seen in the latter half of that game. But we'll get there eventually. But what's more? I think the Research Hall is one of the weakest areas of the game, as the enemies are just way too frustrating to deal with. While I do appreciate the vertical level design and the intricate story woven through pieces of dialogue, I just find myself sprinting through as fast as I can every time I'm here. And last one, as none of these are that big, is that I don't really mind the 30 FPS of Bloodborne. Maybe it's because I grew up playing Halo, where as late as 2012, Halo Reach ran exclusively at 30 FPS, but it just doesn't take me out of the world, other than a few moments like when you kill a boss and the blood explodes and you go down to 1 FPS for a second. That's not to say I wouldn't like to see a remastered version with improved graphics and 60 FPS, but it just doesn't bother me that much. Dark Souls 3 is a weird one because people really seem to either have it in their top tier or near the bottom. While I do agree the early game areas are relatively bland, I prefer a game like Dark Souls 3 where the quality ramps up during your playtime over something like Dark Souls 1, which has a huge fall off somewhere around the mid-game. My hot take for Dark Souls 3, other than it being one of my favorite Souls games, is that I don't think the linearity is much of a problem. Dark Souls 3 doesn't need to be Interconnectivity the Game Part 3. It needs to be an inspired entry into an inspired trilogy, and I definitely think it achieves that. Personally, my favorite component of these games are the bosses, so having a linear experience like in Dark Souls 3 is what allows for the pristine balance that this game has. Nearly every boss feels in a sweet spot of difficulty where it's not completely a pushover or completely broken. For those who are complaining about the Elden Ring balance, I wonder why the two most linear games in the series, Sekiro and Dark Souls 3, are heralded for having such amazing boss balancing. It's almost like when the team can create a streamlined experience, they can make sure your boss encounters are balanced as possible. and you're not showing up and either one-shotting or getting one-shot. Huh, crazy how that works. Dark Souls 3 does have some freedom to make your own paths, such as killing the dancer ASAP and hiking up Lothric Castle, but as I value a curated experience, people just overharp on the linearity of the game. Before we continue, remember to like and subscribe. I make plenty of Souls content that I'm sure you'll love. Not all of it's hot takes, I promise. Obviously, Sekiro is one of the hardest Soulsborne Hero Ring games, if not the hardest. On my first playthrough, every boss was a huge challenge, literally every boss. But after beating the game once, the game becomes the easiest Soulsborne game. Yes, you heard me right, the easiest. I was shocked when I found this to be my experience, but I can put this game down for a year and come back and kill Ishin in a few attempts. At least, that's what happened last time. I think it's because this game is really high risk, high reward with its combat. If you do perfect your blocks, you can take down bosses in seconds, while if you mess up a few times, it means instant death. I like this glass cannon style, which would be continued into Elden Ring, but I didn't expect it to be like learning to ride a bike, where it would just stick with me. A second hot-ish take is while many of the bosses in Sekiro are near perfect, many of them also lack the wow factor that makes me fall in love with a Souls boss. Bosses like Lady Butterfly or Genichiro are phenomenal mechanical encounters, but they just don't hit me in the same way that Pontiff Sullivan or Lady Maria do. There are a few exceptions, but unfortunately some just fall a tiny bit short. My Elden Ring hot take is clearly how much I love the bosses of this game. Bosses like Fire Giant and Elden Beast and Renala are amongst my favorites of the series, and most people think they go from forgettable to unforgettably bad. As I mentioned before, I don't mind the glass cannon style, and I love the over-the-top cinematic quality they bring to the table. I think people are just so hyper-fixated on the continuation of the Dark Souls style of combat that they don't enjoy the content for what it is. I love the wrenches they consistently throw into the mix, and while not every twist works, waterfowl dance, there are so many ambitious and entrancing ideas sprinkled throughout this gargantuan masterpiece. As for a negative hot take, I guess I'm not as excited about Torrent as everybody else seems to be. I love the fact that we're able to travel quickly around a massive open world because of the addition, and the option to fight on Torrent is there, but I don't personally enjoy fighting any boss on Torrent. Some said if Torrent was added to Elden Beast, the fight would have been much better. While I don't see a problem with adding Torrent as an option for those who want to use him, I have zero desire to take out my horse during a boss fight unless absolutely required. And if using Torrent was going to be crucial, then there should have been some invincibility frames added to his dodges. Anyways, that's all from me. Let me know some of your Soulsborne hot takes down below, and I hope you guys have a great day, and don't get too butthurt. Remember, keep it respectful down in the comments. Peace.